Thank you so much for joining me today on American Black Journal. We want to talk a little bit about some of the anti-racism, anti-police brutality protests that have been happening here in the city of Detroit in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And sort of get your perspectives. Carolyn, you come from a long line of activists. Your dad is famed in Detroit. Your mom is famed here in the city of Detroit. And I really want to get your sense around what we're seeing now. You growing up in the type of family and atmosphere that you grew up in, have you seen anything like what we're seeing now in terms of this new civil rights movement?
So I'm old, but I'm not that old. My parents have been involved in a lot of, the civil rights movement and the labor struggles. And so, they've seen where people have risen up, Myself, here in Detroit, I wasn't alive during the rebellions here in Detroit. So, no, I studied history, and what I can try to compare it to, just based off the study and the testimonies that I've witnessed from my father's friends, is the unemployed councils and the hunger strikes that took place during the 1940s and 30s. And so in the battle with Henry Ford and the police opening fire, the Battle of the Overpass. So, just studying that history and the amount of evictions and the food lines that were established back then and the organizing that took place, that's a comparison that I try to draw from, and I'm still studying that history. So but me personally seeing anything like this, no, I haven't.
Yeah, this is, something that I haven't seen in my lifetime either. Tristan, one of the organizers for the Detroit Will Breathe group, can you tell us a little bit about what your message is? What message are you trying to convey, and what change are you trying to enact here in the city of Detroit?
Yeah, well, as part of the national movement around police brutality, the first and foremost thing, right, is the fight to protect Black and brown bodies against state violence, and to repurpose and reprioritize those resources that go into that violent physical repression of our bodies, into investing into our communities, and into our bodies, to make sure that, we have opportunities to be able to be our full selves. And in Detroit, that's not only fighting to defund and demilitarize the police, and really bring accountability to an institution that has unfortunately been able to escape accountability and transparency for a long time, but also to highlight the systemic nature of racism and inequality, and the need to deal with that on a systemic basis. And so that means fighting for a moratorium on evictions during the crisis. It means fighting for justice for victims of police brutality and making sure that their stories are told. It also means fighting for Detroit that allows all of its citizens to flourish and be safe. That's the basic message that we're trying to put forward.
You guys have been in the news a lot in recent weeks. I know that a judge issued an injunction a couple weeks ago, or a temporary restraining order essentially banning police officers from using several tactics that they have been using during the Detroit Will Breathe protests. Also, you guys filed suit against the city of Detroit, and the city is countersuing. And we learned of the news last week that Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and State Representatives Stephanie Chang, along with City Council President Pro Tem Mary Sheffield and City Councilwoman Raquel Castaneda Lopez, jointly signed a letter asking for an independent investigation of the Detroit Police Department. Where are you guys in all of these litigation battles that seem to just all be in motion right now at the same time, and still hitting the streets every night?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is I know the city of Detroit has filed to amend the temporary restraining order. I don't think they, as of yet, filed a countersuit against protesters. They keep saying that, but there's been no legal action towards that. And I think, you know, we are seeking to use every tool that we can to the advantage of bringing transparency to the police department, and reining in their acts. And it's one of the reasons why we're calling for Chief Craig's resignation, and why over 35 organizations is calling for his resignation, and why there's a need for an independent investigation. And his like attitude towards all of these things are pretty atrocious. And I think it's the reason why it's also important to maintain our presence like in the streets, because we know that these institutions unfortunately have been able to you know, go away unscathed in a sense, and that if we're not bringing the kind of pressure and power of like people, that we're just going to end up being disappointed like we have so many times before by these institutions.
Carolyn, the General Baker Institute, named for your dad, General Gordon Baker, has been on the front lines of many fights here in the city of Detroit. One of the things that I really want to get your input on is we can understand and draw from instances and occurrences all over the country that there is an outright war on Black life, Black bodies of Black men and Black women. But in addition to fighting that fight, which the Baker Institute champions, you guys champion fighting, you know, the good fights, there's also a narrative war that is happening at the same time, where there is a narrative that almost tries to suppress and delegitimize these occurrences where Black lives have been threatened or have suffered at the hands of state violence. What approach is the Baker Institute taking in this fight in the city, and as a part of really now a worldwide movement?
So one of our quotes that we stand on comes from my dad and one other, Nelson Pierre, one other revolutionary. Our task is to make thinkers out of fighters and fighters out of thinkers. And prior to the George Floyd incident, you know, our lane has been political popular education, and meeting people where they are, you know, not speaking above them, not, you know, throwing out just a bunch of ideology at folks, and actually meeting them where they are, breaking down the system. And so, and giving them an understanding, like, even if we study my dad's history, he had an evolution that he went through himself. Yeah. And so, so getting people to understand that, like, you just don't become a revolutionary overnight. And, you know, there's narratives out here that make people, you know, the system that we're fighting against is very good at propaganda, understanding the system and how it works. Like, his job is to control propaganda and culture, amongst other things. And so we have to try to do our due diligence and understanding like we're up against narratives that make people think that they're in the situation that they're in because it's their fault, something that they did wrong and not the system. And so trying to educate folks in that, and trying to educate folks in like what the role of the state is, what the role of the police is, what the role of the military is. And it might use this term protect and serve, but it ends there. It doesn't say protect and serve who. You know, they're protecting and serving who they're supposed to be protecting and serving, and that's the system. And not individuals within the system. You know, they protect and serve the capitalists who pay, you know, they keep them in position. And so just getting people to understand that is what we try to do. And then, you know, it takes time, you know, but you just got to keep your eyes on that and understanding education is key. And you're up against a very well organized system, and we have to do our justice in organizing other folks and building cadre that can combat the system.
Tristan, I want to come back to you and sort of build off something that Carolyn was mentioning, just to sort of summarize. Education and activism is fluid, right? You're sort of walking and chewing gum at the same time. And so when we talk about activism and advocacy, what does that education look like when you still have to be out fighting and advocating every single day?
To me, it's just a way of the way I think about like political education is in a set of ways giving people confirmation of their lived experience. Oftentimes, Black people are made to feel as if they're conspiracy theorists or crazy for talking about racism or systemic racism, or thinking that when they're victims of racism, that like, you know, and they don't know how to quite put their, you know, finger on it, that, you know, they're just like, you know, speculating. And so it means to me, pulling out like that truth that people kind of instinctively know, but that gives them the basis to feel confident to demand more. And I think about the, you know, $600 million in over assessments, right? In taxes that the people experience. And when people were like, oh, you're crazy. No one's trying to like take your homes. Like they're not out to get you. Well, actually, yes. And in fact, we have the number, in fact, conservative estimates actually of how much money was extracted from residents and the damaging effects, or the fact that the city of Detroit is investing in a facial recognition program that doesn't work, or that misidentifies people 96% of the time. And you know, it's those things that are really important for us to learn, so that we know how to better ask and demand what we need, you know, for our residents, like for people to have freedom, you know, like to have like justice. And I think is really important to let people know exactly what their experience is. And again, in a lot of ways, confirm what they knew, like, okay, yeah, I didn't quite know the setup, but I knew there was a setup. And you're like, yes, there is. And this is what that setup is. And this is what we can do about it.
For the Baker Institute and for Detroit Will Breathe, and I think this is my last question, what specific policy reforms would you like to see on the other side of this movement, right? So if you are successful at fighting this great fight, what will the nation look like on the other side? Carolyn?
We don't generally fight different policy forms. We like have a whole problem with the age of reform is gone for us, and everything has been reformed as much as it will be. We're looking for a whole change in the system. You know, the system has to be changed. And so if we're talking about reforming, we're talking about
Quick fix.
actually taking this system of capitalism and creating a new system that works for everyone.
Okay.
So that's where we feel.
Okay, and a lot of folks feel that way, especially about certain tenets of the system where you don't treat the fish when the water is sick. There needs to be a complete uprooting and replanting of certain tenets of the system or the system in and of itself. For you, Tristan, and Detroit Will Breathe, what does success look like on the other side of this fight for you guys?
I mean, success for us looks like a police force that doesn't operate with impunity. It looks like instead of having a militarized police force that rains terror on residents, having that money to invest in schools and libraries and community centers. Success for us looks like, guaranteed housing and stable living conditions for people. And I think success for us means real meaningful victories that generations can enjoy. And I do think that the only way that we ultimately make freedom real is to have a system that prioritizes people over profits. And that says, instead of allowing the world's resources to be owned privately, that's something that is distributed and owned collectively, and that the people themselves decide what happens with the resources that they produce and the resources that come from this earth that we all share.
Yeah. Carolyn, I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about a program that the Institute is running, Liberation Mondays. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that's supposed to accomplish?
Yeah, that was in partnership actually with the Black and Brown Alliance of DSA and Community Movement Builders. We started that just trying to be more intentional about education and working together. And we partner also with Detroit Will Breathe on several of the Liberation Mondays. But the idea was to actually go into different areas. So we did it at the Mama Cool House over in Zone 8, that use of
Shakur, yeah.
we did one over there. We did one over at Detroit is Different outside.
Frazier, yes.
Yeah, we did it in Southwest. And so we did it at Quasi's place over on the east side. So we've tried to show places that are actually working in community and trying to show a difference and trying to, so we try to highlight the spaces we were at, but also do education, go to where the folks are and educate the community on what do we mean. We started off with defund the police, rebuild our neighborhoods. And so actually having a chance to sit down and have conversation on what that looks like. And then we took on different topics as we went on abolishing ICE, a Black and Brown Alliance when we were in Southwest. And then we also talked about policing in school when we were at Detroit is Different. And we had youth talking about what that looks like and what that feels like for them. We just recently did the one on housing in an alliance with Moratorium Now and several other organizations, Detroit Eviction Defense. And so just what they got a chance to talk about, like what is coming up with these evictions, what has been going on with these evictions, and also what has been, like Tristan was talking about, like with overtaxation of Detroit. We had Monica Lewis Patrick there speaking from We the People. We had Agnes Hitchcock from Call Them Out speaking. And so we got to talk about like what is really going on in the city of Detroit with these housing takeovers, housing grab, and then these evictions and what's to come and how do we organize ourselves. So that's what it's been about, and we hope to continue. But the weather, we'll see what the weather wants to do. See if we can continue.
Yeah.
But I think around this housing, if we can't stand being outside for 2 hours to do an event. Well, what's going to happen when the folks are evicted? You know, what does that mean for them?
Wow, certainly a perspective that we need to be paying attention to. I want to thank both of you. We certainly have not heard the last from the Baker Institute or Detroit Will Breathe, fighting the good fight, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, and figuring out how to fight that fight as well as remain safe and honor science. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.